Welcome to Christian Warrior Training. My name is Keith. In this episode, we're going to talk about what to do if armed protesters show up at your church. How should you handle that as a security team? Now, look, I do videos for church security teams, but if you're not Christian, that's okay. We still welcome you here. It is going to be good information that could help anybody, including those of you that might do any kind of a function within the community that people might protest you with guns and how you can react to that. But just be aware, this is going to be centered more on churches and what church security teams can do to handle that. Now, do me a favor, hit the like button, hit subscribe, hit the little notification bell to let you know whenever we come up with a new video, because YouTube doesn't always let you know. It also helps it so the word spreads to other people so more people can see this video. And then lastly, do me a favor, share the video with your friends so that way they can see it as well too. It is all free training for you guys. All right, let's get into it. Let's talk about what happened. Why I'm even talking about this in the first place was I'm in Idaho, and on the west end of Boise, the Satanic church here in Idaho decided that they were going to protest armed against one of our local churches. Now, for 6 months, this Baptist church had endured online threats and harassment that culminated with people showing up from the Satanic church on a Sunday just before church as people were coming in to gather. And they were openly displaying AK-47s, bolt action rifles. They were dressed, they were just a little weird. And so after they had done these threats, now they're showing up armed. After they had allegedly sent some threats online, I don't know what those threats are. That's just coming from the church posting some stuff online. They did show up armed. They showed up wearing these funny costumes, and now people are coming to church. How are you going to deal with that as a church security team? So that's what we're going to talk about today. Now, although the protest is alarming, it's not illegal in the state of Idaho. Now, they're protected by the First Amendment and they're protected by the Second Amendment. I myself have shown up to a protest armed before, not as an officer, but as a citizen. It is often that we have, at least once a year, we have armed people show up to the Capitol just to display their Second Amendment right in support of Second Amendment legislation. So a lot of people were complaining that the police department didn't show up, or if they did show up, they were not doing much. And I think people have to understand that there is no law violation. We may not like what is occurring, but it's not illegal. But you do have a duty to protect your church congregants. Again, here they're armed, supposedly, allegedly had made threats, and they are obviously trying to provoke something out of that church. So first and foremost, you have to understand the rights and laws of those people. They are allowed to do it. They just can't trespass, and they can't block your way. If they start blocking the roadway, start blocking people's pass into the church, then that it usually is an arrestable offense, but it's a really lightweight one. Are the cops necessarily going to show up and stand by? I don't know. There's no crime occurring, so they don't have to. Would I, if I showed up to that? Oh, absolutely I would. But it depends on their call volume and what else is going on. So just know that's totally okay. Now, let's change that up now. If a protester blurts out, we're going to shoot you, we're going to kill everyone in your church. Now, that's violation of the law if you feel threatened, and that's important. If you feel threatened, that, and now I would, right? Now, a lot of us don't want to say, oh, I feel threatened by these guys. No, you should, indeed, you are threatened. They supposedly made threats. They are armed. And now if somebody comes out and yells, we're not talking about this specific incident, but a generalized incident. If now somebody blurts out that they're going to shoot you, do they have the method of being able to carry that out? Yes, they do. And if you feel threatened, that could be a violation of law. In some areas, that could be considered a terrorist threat. Now, terrorists, we imagine, like terrorists for 9/11, and that's not necessarily what it is. It's just terrorizing somebody. So you could make an arrest for that. Now, in some places, you may need to do a citizen's arrest. What's a citizen's arrest? That's why where you're doing the arrest. And it's not that the officer's lazy. It's that he or she may not be able to make the arrest because they weren't present when the offense happened. And there's some states have laws that if the officer, and Idaho's one of them, if the officer wasn't present when it occurred, if it's a misdemeanor and they can't make the arrest, you're going to have to do it. Now, just be aware that that is an option. I would do that. As a 30-year cop, I encouraged lots of people over my career to make citizens arrest. I would tell them, hey, it is a violation of law. I can't make an arrest because I didn't see it, but you can make the arrest. You can do a citizen's arrest, and that's how it works. They're going to have you read a form that explains what a citizen's arrest is. You sign the form. You are the arresting person. They go to jail. You will all go to court together, which you're going to go to court anyways. Now, one way to get around all of this is to have, one of the prior videos I did was on having an intelligence officer within your security team, meaning a person's job is to just look at intelligence around. So as an example, this Satanic church, I look at their social media constantly. I look at what they're doing so that if they show up to my church, we would know ahead of time and we can organize ourselves to avoid that, which we'll talk about how to organize yourself and avoid something like that. But it's important to have that intelligence officer within your church. They can liaison with the police department to get more intelligence from them. And then hopefully you can see the threat coming and then you can change. Now, this church in Idaho, I think they knew that something was going to happen. They had been politically active and it offended this Satanic church. And I think everybody kind of knew something was going to happen. So if you know what's going to happen, you can prepare for it. One of the most important things when you get into how you're going to respond to this is to have a policy of non-confrontation and de-escalation. You don't want to send your security team out there to go confront them because that's going to cause issues. And to be honest, that's probably what they want. And then they're going to video that interaction and then use it against you to put you in a bad light. It's best, obviously, you're going to call the police and you're going to try and have them handle it. But if they can't handle it because there's no crime, it's best not to engage and go ahead and some of the things that you can do is, number one, you got to ensure the safety of your congregation, but you can notify your congregation to maybe you might have enough warning that you can change locations and you can hold church at a separate location and take all the wind out of their sails. You could also look at where they're going to gather and then ensure that your congregants come in a different location or you bus them in so that they avoid those protesters, because when your congregation comes in, tensions are going to flare and you might have some little mini confrontations occurring. So it's best just to keep everybody separate and away from that. So as an example, if they're on the west side of your church and you have an east entrance, then bring your people in on the east side and then let them leave on the east side. That would be the best way to handle things. Another thing you should be doing is training your people on de-escalation techniques. Now, we did a prior video on de-escalation here. You can go back and look at it and you can learn how de-escalation works and some of the tips and things that you can do to de-escalate a situation overall. One of the things that I think you should do, but it might be provocative for some churches, is to have a react team. Now, what's a react team? It's a reactionary team. Now, in essence, you're going to have a group of armed people from your church that are going to be standing by at a certain location, basically like an overwatch, to look over where these protesters are. They're not there to confront the protesters, but if one of those protesters decides to start shooting at your people, you have a team of highly trained people that can react to that person and stop them if the police aren't there. This is all based off if the police don't show up and aren't going to do anything. Now, that react team, you can't just pick like 5 guys because they're good hunters and you think they're a good shot. It comes down to decision-making, tactics, and equipment. Now, my team that we have lots of people that are prior law enforcement that were SWAT team leaders, gang team sergeants, narcotic unit members that all have experience dealing with high-risk scenarios. Certainly, you can get them back together. Now, if you're not lucky enough to have anybody like that, I would recommend finding 5 level-headed people on your team. Send them to training. Send them to a rifle school, a pistol school, learn tactics, learn all that kind of stuff. Learn those tactics, learn those weapons manipulation skills, and then train 8 hours every month. Now, is that realistic? For a lot of churches, it's not. So this react team concept, it's probably not going to work for a lot of churches. In fact, my church, I would love it if we had a react team. I just don't know if it's actually going to happen. It's better not to have a react team if you can't find the people that can actually serve on it and be level-headed and normal. Your best bet out of this whole thing is to have that intelligence officer that can look ahead of time to see where the problem is going to be. And if you know it's going to happen ahead of time, to avoid those issues in the first place. You also want to prepare your church. Now, this whole incident underscores the need for churches to be proactive in preparing for potential threats. Now, how are you going to do that? One of the things you can do is create an emergency response plan. And that response plan is basically going to prepare you for any potential threat. You're going to assess risks, right? Identify any potential threats like protests, natural disasters, medical emergencies, anything like that. And then you want to have specific defined roles and responsibilities within the church safety team. You want to assign specific tasks to their staff and the volunteers, such as monitoring entrances, providing first aid, what have you. You want to develop procedures. Have a procedure if armed people show up to protest your church. I would not suggest canceling church. We should not be doing that. But again, we can send people to different entrances. We can bus them in and basically avoid all those protesters. You can coordinate with local law enforcement. You want to establish communications way ahead of time before any of this even happens and have that clear line of communication. I know some police departments and some sheriff's department actually have clergy liaison person. So like their job is the liaison with the clergy. We have that here in Idaho. It's wonderful. I love it. And then most importantly, you want to train and practice. You want to regularly train your people and conduct drills to ensure their readiness. So tomorrow, as an example, my team is going to do something called reality-based training. It's going to be a Saturday, and our team is going to go out and they're going to train as if there was a real active shooter within the church, somebody with a gun. We're going to do armed protesters. We're going to do all that and how to respond to it. Some of them are shoot, no shoot. Some of them are just going to be de-escalation. Some of them, they're actually going to have to go in and shoot. And we use airsoft weapons to do that. And of course, full safety gear and everything else. And so that training and that practice is perfect. You want to communicate with your congregation. You want to communicate with your congregation. You want to be transparent. You want to have compassionate communication with your congregation. You want to keep members informed about safety measures, emergency plans, and any potential threats that fosters trust and cooperation. You want to use newsletters, social media, community meetings to keep that dialogue going with your church to let them know some of the things that are going on. If you don't have a volunteer security team at your church, you want to make sure you have one right now. It is something, especially coming up to 2024, things are getting a little weird. I think it's super important for you to have that, that volunteer security team to just make sure that your people are safe while they worship. You want to recruit people that have relevant skills or a willingness to learn. I got to tell you that our best, we have so many cops with tactical experience and we have combat veterans. But I got to tell you, one of the best people on our team is a grandma. Easily, she's a team leader, and she easily does the best in all of our scenario training. She does fabulous. So don't necessarily lean towards law enforcement and former military. Certainly, they're great people, but don't miss the value of some of those hidden gems within your church. You want to do regular training. My team trains once a month for 4 hours in the morning. In September, we're doing a full active shooter scenario in one of our campuses for 6 hours. We have role players, moulage. We're going to coordinate with everybody. It's going to be wonderful. Another thing you could do is have professional security services. I travel a lot training cops all around the country. One of the things I do is, like, if I'm there on a Wednesday night and I've got nothing going on, I look at who has a church service at a Christian church near me, and I go to their service. I have a couple of times been, in fact, I remember I went to one in Florida with multiple campuses, and when I went in, there was a deputy sheriff from the local sheriff's department that was providing security. We talked for quite a while, and that was something that the church paid for, to have somebody there, and it worked out very well for them. That one armed officer with communication with hundreds of other officers in the area was much more effective than a 5-person volunteer team with no experience in dealing with armed conflict. So just something to think about. You want to make sure that you have some kind of surveillance or overwatch. That includes surveillance systems like cameras that see the entire campus, including outside. That's where it's all going to start, is outside. You want to have some kind of an overwatch team if you have. You want to have some kind of an overwatch team if you can. They're just there to basically watch over what's going on and act as a team that can move in and deal with any issues that come up right away. That pretty much wraps it up. Let's just go over again what you should do when armed protesters show up. Number one, you should have an intelligence officer whose main job is to predict these things before they happen. And if they do, you can come up with a plan to avoid it. You want to interact with law enforcement and see if they can take the lead and see if they can somehow control those people, stop them, keep them in one area, something. You want to try to get your people into the church, but through an area that the protesters can't see. And then lastly, if you can resettle to a new location for that one day when they show up, that would be the best way possible. Now, the controversial one, the one that not many churches, probably 1% of the churches would actually be able to pull off, is that React team. I think my church can pull it off, but I don't know if the church leaders are willing to have something like that happen. I think we could pull it off because we have the people with the experience and the training to do it. And, I think it would work well. So just keep that in the back of your head as a maybe. And most importantly, don't lose your faith in God. This is all part of his master plan. God is leading the way for us. He's made the plan before you even thought about what to do next. Just know that he's holding you in his hands, and ultimately everything is by his design. So I hope you enjoyed the video. I hope it helped. Do me a favor, leave a comment in the comment section. Let me know what you think. Let me know if there's anything else that you want covered in future videos. Lastly, remember your ABCs, always be caring.